This is the story of Andy and Rafaelia Basquez. Mostly Andy for now, until new information is discovered. So this is Aniceto Vasquez. You know him best as Andy Basquez. Handsome, right? Now you know where you get it from. You may or may not know much about his past before coming to the United States, so allow me to spin you a tale about how the keys to unlock his past were right in front of us. Now, I'm kind of skipping ahead in the timeline, but in 1940, Andy applied for a Social Security card and listed his parents as Sabas Vasquez and Simona Maldonado, with Leon, Guanajuato, Mexico as his birthplace. So let's start there with his parents. Sabas and Simona had 10 children together. The baptism records were kept and maintained by the Catholic Church, called Purísima del Consuelo, located in Limón, Guanajuato, Mexico. The church is in fact still in use today. And thanks to the baptism records from the church, we were able to figure out who Aniceto's siblings are. Keep in mind those baptism records, they're all in Spanish. Without further ado, the first child born to Sabas and Simona was Feliz Vasquez. He was born about 1877, and then the next child was Maria Sixto, born in 1877. Now she was their only daughter. 5 years later, Aniceto Vasquez was born in 1882. The next baby that was born was named Nicolas Vasquez in 1883. Whoa. Wait a second. That name sounds kind of familiar. Yep, it looks like he named his first son with Rafaelia after his brother that was closest to him in age. The next child after that was Feliciano Vasquez in 1884. And then Martin Vasquez in 1885. Next was Tomas and Gil in 1887. We're pretty sure that they were twins, but sadly, Gil passed away not long after being born, and Tomas passed away 6 months later. Now, we've all heard the story of Aniceto's first family, right? Again, the keys to Aniceto's past were right in front of us. I'll skip ahead again so you can see what I mean. On Aniceto's World War I draft registration, Aniceto put Antonia Vasquez Guevara as his next of kin. Come to find out, Aniceto and Antonia were married around 1900. When Aniceto and Antonia were married, she was about 15 and he was about 18. The following year, their first child was born. Now, so far, the baptism records have not become available. However, between some death certificates and marriage certificates, their names have been uncovered. So without further delay, we have his children's names from his first marriage. Luciano Vasquez was born in 1901. We found the information from a marriage certificate. Next was Pilar Vasquez, born about 1903, and then Ileana Vasquez, born in 1905. Unfortunately, Ileana passed in 1906, and Pilar passed in 1907. Then Camaria Vasquez was born next. However, we still don't know the exact year she was born. And finally, Esteban Vasquez was born in 1910. Now, Andy had 3 children and his wife in Mexico to take care of. He came to the United States in February 1910 looking for new opportunities. He did end up going back to Mexico, but again returned to the United States in November 1910. Aniceto arrived in the midst of the American naturalization movement, which was geared to help immigrants not only learn English, but to read and write and Americanize their names and assimilate into the American culture. Aniceto likely saw many posters during his arrival, and it impressed upon him later on. There were even parades for newly naturalized immigrants in celebration.
As fate would have it, just after Aniceto left for the United States in November 1910, Mexico had a national election which resulted in the Mexican Revolution. It sure would be hard to visit your family with the U.S. soldiers blockading the U.S.-Mexico border while fighting within your own country was going on. So we can see why it is very difficult for Aniceto to get back home. The revolution came to Antonia and children's own state of Guanajuato, Mexico at the grueling Battle of Celaya, which is really two battles, April 6th and 7th, 1915, and then April 15 and 16, 1915. More nearby battles ensued. The Battle of Trinidad was June 1st in Leon, Mexico, Aniceto and Antonia's hometown. The battle was also known as Bajío a León, which lasted 38 days, and yet another nearby battle occurred in Aguascalientes in July that same year. Those battles sealed the Constitutionalist victory over Pancho Villa. General Pancho Villa and the undefeated Army of the North had amassed 19,500 horsemen and 6,000 cavalry, who fought against General Álvaro Obregón's 9,400 cavalry and 14,500 infantry. Although Obregón lost his right arm to shell fire, Villa's forces were exhausted after repeated assaults were thwarted by Obregón and his men. Villa suffered 8,000 casualties and was forced to retreat back to his base in the north. It was during Villa's defeat that Antonia would have fled their home, going north and losing contact with Aniceto, who was working as an immigrant worker in the United States. We now know Antonia and children ended up in Chihuahua, Mexico, 428 miles north and west from Leon, Mexico. In 1917, Aniceto had to sign up for the draft for World War I in the United States. Aniceto listed Antonia Guevara as his next of kin on his draft registration form. It was from this form that we learned of Antonia's identity. With the end of World War I in 1918 and the end of the Mexican Revolution in 1920, life in the United States and Mexico was returning to peace and prosperity. The problem for Aniceto and Antonia was that time and circumstances had separated them and all contact had been lost. So Aniceto never knew what had happened to his family, and he didn't know that Antonia and children ended up 428 miles from him and their home.
Antonia got remarried in 1920. After the Mexican Revolution ended, Aniceto went back searching for his lost family. When he didn't find Antonia and the children, that's when he brought back Rafaela Jaramillo to the United States, and they were married in 1923 in Fabens, Texas, which is where they also had Nicholas Vasquez. Yes, Vasquez, not Bosky. They had not yet at this point applied for citizenship. So next, Aniceto and Rafaela, they lived all across the southern Midwest. Daniel Vasquez was born in Colliesville, Texas. Juanita, or Johnny, was born in Kansas City, Kansas. The next baby was baby Julia, who was born in Kansas. This Julia sadly did not live for very long and had passed away. The next one born was Ramon, or as we know him, Raymond, who was born in Caputa, South Dakota. Next was Jesus, or as you know him, Jesse. He was born December 30th, 1930. 1930 was also the year that Luciano, Camarina, and Esteban got married. Each one of them on their marriage certificates stated that Aniceto Vasquez and Antonia Guevara as their parents. They also listed their birthplace as Leon, Mexico. That's how we knew we had the right family. Now, the rest of Aniceto and Rafilia's children were all born in Wetumpka, Oklahoma. Gonzalez Vasquez, or as you know him, Gunner, was born July 13th, 1931. Chancelie Vasquez was born May 12th, 1934. And Rafael, or Ralph, Basquez was born October 24th, 1935. Dolores, or Doris, Vasquez was born July 26th, 1937. And then, March 23rd, 1938, Aniceto and Rafilia applied for naturalization citizenship, and Aniceto changed his name to Andy Basquez. And Rafilia and the children all took on the last name as Basquez. This is also when Andy applied for a Social Security card, the one that we talked about earlier, which led us to finding out Savas Vasquez and Simona Maldonados were Andy's parents. So the next child born after this is Julia Basquez. She was actually the first one in our family named Basquez from birth, which was on April 16th, 1939. Maggie was born next. She was born February 20th on 1940. And then the baby of the family, Jim Basquez, who was born April 28th, 1942. So we asked Aunt Doris to take a DNA test, and she graciously and happily did it. She was even excited to. So let me tell you how this helps us to know where she, or should I say we, come from and how the information was acquired. We use Ancestry.com for the DNA test. So from 2000 to 2012, there was a nonprofit organization that was dedicated to building the world's foremost collection of DNA samples and the corresponding geological information, eventually gathering a database of 100,000 DNA samples and associated 4-generation pedigrees, meaning basically a lot of people spit into some tubes and also gave their family trees. Through the science, technology, and traditional geological research, the DNA demonstrated that testing was a crucial component to understanding the complete picture of one's family. So for 12 years, that team gathered samples from volunteers on 6 continents in more than 150 countries. In addition to the immense distances traversed, the team had to sift through thousands of volunteers just to find those who were willing to give the DNA samples, in spite of the fact that there was no real benefit to them at the time. But they had to find those volunteers that had the documented family trees that contained at least the 4 generations back. And this was a very expensive venture that was funded solely by Jabe Sorensen. He spent millions of his own dollars to fulfill that dream. Teams collected the DNA samples. They also captured the faces of the people they encountered. From Japan and Fiji to Kenya, the Czech Republic, Chile, their photos reveal the diversity of populations around the world that are represented in the DNA and pedigree data. So their hard work and many individuals that gave their DNA from across the world, it helped to create those markers and algorithms that identified our family, as Doris specifically connected and matched those that were tested being native to North America, which is everything you see in yellow here. It specifically links her to identifiers in western and central Mexico, which is where Leon, Mexico is. And it even shows migration patterns in the individuals that are from that area. While we only know some of the family back to the 1800s, the DNA for the migration actually reflects and ties us much further back to that. You can see there's a migration pattern identified that starts about 1750. This is where our ancestors would have lived and moved around. As you can see, the closer to now it becomes, the more it connects us there. It shows us ever expanding and encompassing until it starts to directly link up to our family records that support and reflect our DNA ties to that area. Here we have Simona Maldonado, Andy's mom, and it shows her being born in this area. This is Andy and Raphelia's lifetime. So you can kind of see where the overlap in our timeline also reflects in our DNA. And here's where, from the records, we can see that we're on par with others from the area. It even reflects and shows the reason for the migration patterns is because of the Mexican Revolution. Most populations stayed with other Hispanic populations, and most of them settled around the Southern California area. However, Andy and Raphelia settled in Oklahoma instead of following others. Now, there are other countries listed in her DNA that would be from individuals born a very, very, very long time ago, and it's only a small percentage in her DNA. Well, our DNA. So what else is there? Now, these could be inherited from any ancestors in her past. Doris inherited 5% from Spain, 2% from Italy, England, Wales, and Northern Europe, 2%, Basque, 2%, Cameroon, Congo, and Southern Batu, 1%, Middle East, 1%, Portugal, 1%, Ivory Ganda, 1%, European Jewish, 1%. And that is our family's history.